So what happens when a government looks at one of the biggest media companies on the continent and says, your prices are too high, cut them or else? Well, you get a really high-stakes standoff, and the fallout, it could affect a whole lot more than just your TV subscription. We're going to break it all down.
I mean, it doesn't get much more direct than that, does it? This was the ultimatum that Ghana's government basically threw down to the satellite TV giant DSTV. It's a simple, stark choice that pits raw government power against a massive private company. And you just know someone has to blink first.
And just look at how fast this all went down. The threat was made public on August 1st, and the deadline for DSTV to respond, August 7th. That is less than a single week to make a decision that could change their entire business. You know, that timeline alone tells you the government was not messing around.
Okay, so how did we even get here? How did things get this heated? The whole conflict really boils down to this fundamental question. Where does a government's duty to protect its citizens, the consumers, end, and a company's freedom to set its own prices begin? Let's look at the arguments from both sides of the fence.
The government's case is pretty simple, right? They're saying DSTV has something of a monopoly on must-have content, think Premier League football, and their prices aren't coming down even though the local currency, the cedi, has been getting stronger. But DSTV fires back, saying, whoa, not so fast. They argue that a short-term currency gain doesn't just magically erase massive long-term depreciation. Plus, their prices have to cover all these complex global costs, for satellites, for content rights. It's complicated. And here's the data that really drives the government's argument home. I mean, just look at this comparison. You can see right there how prices in Ghana stack up against other major African markets like Nigeria and Angola. That difference, the one you can see with your own eyes, is an incredibly powerful tool for winning over public opinion.
So you might be thinking, okay, this is a fight over TV prices. What's the big deal? Well, the analysis from the Labari Journal, which is our main source for this explainer, suggests that the real story here is actually much, much bigger, with consequences that could ripple out across the entire economy.
And this right here, this brings us to the absolute heart of the issue. This fear of setting what's called a dangerous precedent. The concern is that if a government can successfully force one company to cut its prices just by threatening its license, what's to stop it from doing it again and again and again to other industries?
So, let's be super clear on what we mean by regulatory precedent. It's basically when a government takes an action once, and that single action creates a kind of unwritten rule, an expectation that they might do it again in a similar situation down the road. It essentially creates a new normal for how business and government interact with each other.
And this is where that theory starts to feel very real. The source lays out this potential domino effect. See, it starts with pay TV, with DSTV. If that domino falls, what's next? Maybe the big telecom companies. And in fact, the same minister has already put them on notice. From there, maybe e-commerce platforms. The big question the source poses is, where does it all stop? Does it end with local restaurants? This is that slippery slope that has the entire business community really worried. To make this super personal, just think about it like this for a second. What if enough people complained on social media that your favorite local spot, your go-to restaurant, was just too expensive? Could the government then step in and force them to slash their menu prices, completely ignoring the rising costs of food and rent and paying their staff? That's the core fear here, just scaled up to a national level. So with the stakes this incredibly high, DSTV is, well, they're really backed into a corner. So what does a company actually do when it's facing an ultimatum like this one? What are its real, practical options?
Well, it seems to boil down to three very different paths. The first, and maybe the simplest, is to just acquiesce, give in, lower the prices, take the hit, and protect the license. Or they could go the other way and fight back, challenge the government's threat in court. And then there's the nuclear option. Just pack up their bags and leave the Ghanaian market completely.
So what's the prediction? What's the final call? Well, the Labari Journal makes a very clear one. They predict that DSTV's parent company, MultiChoice, will ultimately bend the knee. The thinking is that taking a financial hit right now is probably a better business decision than losing access to a key African market for good.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. Why does a fight over TV prices in Ghana matter to the rest of us?
Well, because this isn't really just about one company or one country. It's a major test case for that delicate balance between government power and a free market.
You see, the ripple effect here could touch almost everyone. For subscribers, the stakes are obvious, right? It's about getting to watch your shows versus a potential service disruption. But for local businesses, it's about so much more than just pubs losing the football crowds. The source points out it could also mean less investment in local Ghanaian movies and shows. And for all private companies and investors, it introduces this huge element of risk, this uncertainty about who's really in control of prices.
So in the end, this entire complex situation really comes down to one fundamental question. What is the proper role of a government in an economy? Should it act like a referee, just making sure there's a fair playing field for everybody? Or should it be a player, jumping onto the field itself to dictate the price of the game? The answer to that question is going to define the economic future, not just for Ghana, but for any market that's watching this all unfold.